It's me from my channel. Let me tell you a story. In 1970, the music stopped. The Beatles, after just 10 years of rewriting the world's soundtrack, walked separate paths. Creative tensions, personal differences, the weight of being legends. But what if they had found a way to stay? What if Abbey Road was just the beginning? If you're watching this video, then you're part of the Beatles fandom, which means that you already know how this story goes. You probably know about the breakup, the solo careers, the missed opportunities. So let's not waste any more time. Start where the story diverges. In our alternate timeline, the Beatles take a 2-year break, not a breakup. They return in 1972 with a psychedelic soul rock album that blends Imagine with Band on the Run. The band embraces earth music, a fusion of Western pop and Indian classical music pioneered by George Harrison. At first, record executives don't understand it, but soon radio stations begin playing it. The album goes double platinum. It's called Back. Their next album comes out 4 years later. The title is SGT, Pepper's Back Again. It features an appearance by Elton John, who was a huge fan of earth music. By 1976, they are headlining the first ever Glastonbury Festival, a humble 1,000-strong crowd. No mean feat for a bunch of aging hippies. But their performance is so electric that a local journalist compares them to the Sex Pistols. They looked older, he writes, but they were still dangerous. By 1980, their sound has fused with the latest trends in synth pop and world music. This new genre, Beatletro, hits one on both sides of the Atlantic. When MTV launches on August, the Beatles are one of its first acts, releasing a series of experimental, groundbreaking music videos. Now, you might be thinking, how can this be possible? How can the band still be together? Well, the secret is that they never stopped making music. Yes, the Beatles kept recording and performing until 2023, and it wasn't just nostalgia either. Their albums in the 80s and 90s regularly reached the top 10. So what else do we miss by not living in this timeline? How does the world look different if the Beatles never broke up? First of all, it's much louder. During the Cold War, the Beatles become unlikely ambassadors of peace. In 1983, Lennon and McCartney release a global anthem for nuclear disarmament. Imagine All the People reaches one in every country on Earth, and remains the most streamed song of the year. Harrison travels to India again in 1986. This time he joins Ravi Shankar in an international digital orchestra for a landmark performance at the Royal Albert Hall. The show is recorded and released as an album, which reaches #1 in the UK charts. In 1988, Ringo Starr is appointed a peace ambassador for the United Nations, and spends the next decade traveling the world, bringing cultures together through music. One day he bumps into an old friend. In an alternate universe, the young American singer and actress, an old friend from Hamburg days, a former flame, a near neighbor in New York. They rekindle their friendship, and she begins attending Beatles concerts. In 1989, she even joins them on stage during the encore to sing I Saw Her Standing There. And then the Berlin Wall falls. On November 9th, 1989, millions of people gather in front of the Brandenburg Gate as the border is opened, and people from East and West Germany are finally reunited. In the background, a lone singer performs an acoustic version of Across the Universe. It's not John Lennon, but somebody who sounds very much like him. This song, once an anthem of the counterculture movement, now symbolizes hope for a new generation. We miss so much. We miss out on John's children growing up with a father who is not a legend, but a real person. We miss out on Yoko Ono and Sean Lennon. We miss out on endless solo projects. We miss out on George marrying Olivia and having Kira and Julian. We miss out on Paul singing Hey Jude at his father's funeral. But what happens when you bring all these timelines together? You get a mess, confusion, creative differences, tension. After all, each of these men lived multiple lives, made several careers worth of music. That's why it feels so strange today to listen to the Beatles without imagining the other three standing alongside John. It's weird to imagine Paul McCartney without the cheeky grin of John Lennon by his side. Strangely, the group's mythology grew only after they broke up. Today, their individual legacies have overshadowed the legacy of the band. So let's explore what would have happened if the fourth member of the band, the fifth Beatle, had remained. If the chemistry between those four guys had continued to evolve, what would that have sounded like? Would it have been good? Well, let's ask AI. This is a demo track generated by an artificial intelligence. All I gave it was the prompt Beatles song, 1984. And here's what it came up with. Tell me what you think. I think it's pretty good. At first, the Beatles tried to keep a low profile. They retired from touring, retreated to the countryside, focused on the studio, but eventually the lure of the stage got to them. In 1992, they performed 4 sold-out shows at London's Royal Albert Hall. From there, they embarked on a world tour that spanned 5 continents and 97 shows. It was their biggest tour yet. In 1995, the Beatles played to 100,000 people in Rio de Janeiro. It was the largest concert in the history of Latin America. In 1996, the world mourned the loss of a Beatle when George Harrison was diagnosed with cancer. His bandmates stood by him throughout his battle. A documentary film, All Things Must Pass, showed the Beatles rehearsing, recording, and performing live for the first time in years. George's final public performance was on March 29, 1997, when the Beatles played a benefit concert for the Prince's Trust. The following year, they released an album called Free as in Freedom and Free as in Free Bird. The songwriting credits went to George Harrison, his last work with the Beatles. They toured through 1998, but it was clear that something was missing. The end came quietly in December 1999, when the Beatles announced their disbandment through a statement on their website. It said, "There is nowhere else to go. We are the sum of our experiences, our creativity, our friendships, our rivalries, our loves, our heartbreaks, our joys. We will always be a work in progress." Then they disappeared from the public eye for the next 2 decades. Some fans were disappointed, but most understood that the band had run its course. Occasionally, rumors swirled that the Beatles were planning a reunion tour or that an unheard demo was about to be released, but the band remained silent. Finally, on October 9, 2019, the mystery was solved. The Beatles returned to social media. Their first post was a tweet that read, "Back at Apple HQ, working on something special." Over the next few months, they shared photos and videos of themselves back in the studio. On May 15, 2020, they dropped a surprise single called Now and Then, collaboration with modern artists like Lil Nas X, Billie Eilish, and Harry Styles. The song was a hit. It reached no one in dozens of countries. It also sparked speculation about a possible reunion tour. When the band appeared on Jimmy Fallon's Tonight Show in September 2021, it was obvious that they were still close. As they sat down to answer questions, Paul joked, "Can I ask them not to talk about the breakup?" John laughed. "Don't worry, mate. We're not going to do that." On April 14, 2022, the Beatles announced a worldwide tour, their first in 62 years. It was everything the fans had hoped for. The band seemed rejuvenated, energized, and excited to be back on stage. In February 2023, the Beatles released a new album, Let It Be 2025. It was the band's first album of original material since 1997. The reviews were mixed, but the album reached no. 1 in more than 20 countries. On June 2025, the band played their final show at London's Wembley Stadium. 80,000 fans watched as the 4 friends took the stage. They sang all the old favorites, but the highlight of the show was the new material. The band was tight, their harmonies were perfect. The audience danced and sang along. As the final notes of Let It Be faded away, the crowd gave the band a standing ovation. John, Paul, George, and Ringo took a deep bow. They knew that they had just played the last show of their career. It was bittersweet. They were sad to say goodbye, but also proud of what they had accomplished. In the end, the Beatles didn't break up. They stayed together until the end. And that's what makes this timeline different from ours. All right, that's it. Thank you so much for watching this episode of What If. I hope you liked it. If you did, please leave a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss another episode. See you next time.